Fáilte over the Cardia Iascary, welcome along to another video from Gundog and Fly. And today I'm going to be talking to you about something very important if you're a fly tyer, and if you're not a fly tyer, you may not find it at all interesting. But I'm going to tell you about. I'll give you a little bit of history first. I started tying flies, believe it or not, probably more than 50 years ago. And I've been tying flies ever since. And to give you some idea of what it was like to try and tie flies back, say, we'll just say, for example, 40 years ago, or even 30 years ago. I use the very best of everything now because it's available. I have a vise that I bought, imported from South Africa, the J vise, which I'm very happy with. It's state of the art, built by one gentleman in his workshop. He's an engineer, and it's a state of the art product, and inconceivable. I couldn't even conceive of something like that when I started fly tying. My first vise was a clothes peg, literally a clothes peg. I didn't even know that actual vices for fly tying existed because they simply were not available here. Well, they were possibly available in Ireland, but I had no access to them, or had never even seen one, not to mind use one. So a clothes peg is what I started out with, and I learned to tie by holding a hook in the clothes peg and tying. And the thread that we used wasn't specifically manufactured for fly tying either. It was just ordinary thread that people would sew things with. We scraped and scrimped feathers and little bits of this and little bits of that, but feathers were generally from wildfowl or domestic chickens, and that was it. But we managed. But the range of materials was very, very, very limited. And as time progressed, more stuff became available. And what I specifically wanted to talk to you about today was the likes of this. I remember reading an American fly fishing magazine, and they spoke of genetic hackle. In fact, the magazine had been brought here by an American angler and given to my father. He had guided him on the river, and he gave him the magazine. He had it in his luggage or whatever. And that was the first time I had ever seen any reference to genetic hackle. And I read it, that particular article about the genetic hackle and what it described. There was a company in America, I'm not sure whether it was Whitings or Mets, it was one or other of those, who had developed in a laboratory a way of genetically modifying chickens so that they would grow feathers like this. And there were photographs of those type hackles in the magazine. And I was blown away by it. But again, there was no access to anything like that here in Ireland back then. They just simply weren't here. And there was nobody, to my knowledge back then, who sold any range of fly tying materials here in Ireland. They just simply weren't available. So I drooled over the article reading about these feathers that were long and slim, and you could tie down to any size, virtually down to size 22, 24, 26 even, which was inconceivable for me. So a few more years went by, and I remember I went to a shop in Kilkenny, and they had a small range of fly tying materials. I think this was during the early 80s. And he had grizzle hackle, but not genetically modified grizzle hackle. Grizzle was the one I specifically wanted because I just knew intuitively that grizzle would produce a good fly. he had what I would now call an Indian cape. You can buy them in most fly shops. They're generally just thrown in a box. You root through them. They're the very, very cheapest end of fly tying feathers. And he had what you could call GRIZZLE hackle, and I bought one of those, and I struggled with it. Like, the smallest you could tie on it would be a size 10, and I wanted to tie very, very small dry flies, and it was almost impossible. And then eventually stuff like this did become available in Ireland, but the price was absolutely outrageous. I mean, way out of my league, and I aspired to owning something like this, but just simply couldn't buy it. That was the bottom line. Just another little thing as well, they perfected the genetic modification to grow these feathers to such a point. They grew so long that they had to even further genetically modify the chickens to grow longer legs so that they wouldn't step on the feathers and break them. That's the way they did it. So eventually I was able to buy genetic hackles, and they were an absolute revelation. Particularly GRIZZLE. Anyone who's a fly tyer should not be without GRIZZLE hackle. GRIZZLE hackle is, you can literally throw anything you like onto a hook in terms of a tail and dubbing, and just wrap a GRIZZLE hackle on it and it'll catch fish. It's that simple. Whatever it is about GRIZZLE hackle, my own speculation is that because of the black and white barring, it has the illusion of movement, I think. Now that's just my own view of it. So I began tying flies with the genetic GRIZZLE hackle. I put an orange body in the summertime, an olive body in the springtime, and that's all that was required. And I caught many, many, many trout on just very, very simple flies just with the GRIZZLE hackle. Now today I have GRIZZLE hackle here, as you can see, in the traditional barred black and white. I have it dyed olive here, which is another great hackle for any kind of fly. As well as that, I have GRIZZLE hackle in bigger sizes, which I use for tying bigger flies like, say, Danica mayflies, and I use them also for streamers. So that's a little bit of history of kind of an abbreviated version of, if you like. Just look at the length of this feather. I'd be guessing that it's approximately a foot long. Where would you have got a feather like that 40 years ago in Ireland? You just simply wouldn't. They just didn't exist here. And that feather alone, I can tie a minimum of 10 flies with just one feather. Isn't that incredible? So that's it about the GRIZZLE hackle, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you two examples of using these GRIZZLE hackles on two types of flies. Now, just before I tie those flies, I just want to give you a close-up of what these feathers look like. This is the GRIZZLE dyed olive, and as you can see, there are a couple of hundred feathers left on this one. This particular GRIZZLE here, I've used approximately half of this already, and I think at the time when I bought it, it cost around €200, which is quite an outlay for just one. This is a saddle, by the way, so there's no confusion. You can get capes, which are the feathers from the neck of the bird, but these are actually saddle hackles, and don't be without them if you're a fly tyer. So now I'm going to show you probably has to be the simplest fly of all times. The hook I'm using here is a size 19 Tiemco, size 19 or 20. I'm going to tie a Griffiths gnat, or if you like, a version of the Griffiths gnat, because the Griffiths gnat itself requires more than just the hackle, but I'm going to use just the hackle and the tie-in thread. The tie-in thread, by the way, this is Semperfli Nano Silk in 12-0 yellow. in my experience, it makes no difference what colour tying thread you use on this particular fly, and that you actually leave out the other ingredient, which is peacock herring. Now, this is one of the feathers from the grizzle saddle that I showed you, and all I'm going to do now is just tie in this grizzle hackle here, wind it all the way up to the front, and then we just palmer that hackle just like that. Just a few turns to hold it, make it secure. Now a whip finish. And that's the completed fly. Simple as that. It takes a minute to tie this fly once you're practiced. It's simple. And this fly is lethal. This fly is one of the best flies that I know of, particularly in high summer when the river is low and fish are feeding on very tiny midges and the like. This fly, you will catch fish all day long with this fly, simply tied with a grizzle hackle and tying thread. That's it. Simple as that. Doesn't get much easier than that. Now I'm going to tie a different fly here. I have to grab my box here now. Now what I'm going to tie here is what we call here in Ireland a mayfly. Now a mayfly is used as a generic term in the US, I know, and in other places as well. This is a specific mayfly. This is Ephemera danica, the river mayfly basically, and size 8 hook, just a standard dry fly hook. Same tying thread or tying silk if you like as the last fly, and just going to tie the thread down along and then back up to about a third of the way along the hook. Now this is the big old grizzle dyed olive, and I've taken out 2 feathers from that, these 2 here, and I'm going to turn them back to back. And then like that. Can you see it like that? I hope you can see. There's a curvature. They curve away from each other essentially. Can you see that curve? Hopefully. Anyway, a loose turn and then a tight turn. There we are. Winding down onto that and tightening as I go back. Now cut the waist off. Now I'm going to come back up and I'm going to create the wings. I'll just pull them back like that, tie a few turns in front of them, and that will have the effect of getting them to stand up vertically. Now you could leave it just like that and that would be fine, or you can split the wings and do a figure of 8 around them like this, and that will have the effect of separating them into sort of a V formation if you like. Just to show you, I think I can do it, yeah, like that. Okay, now back down along to just opposite the barb, assuming there's a barb on the hook. And now pheasant tail. This was something that was available to us many years ago because we used to hunt pheasants all the time. Regrettably, that's come to an end around here as well, but anyway, that's another story. So I'm going to make a tail out of this couple of fibers of pheasant tail. There's Ephemera danica tail, mayfly tail basically. Now just going to trim that off. Now you can make the body out of many materials, but I'm just going to use a bit of dubbing. sort of a random olive colour with a bit of sparkle in it. Sometimes I use just what comes to hand, what's nearest, and it seems to make no difference. I think it's the overall shape of the fly that makes it attractive. So here we go. And now I'm just going to go in between the wings again in the figure of 8. There we go. Now, the old grizzle, standard grizzle again, and I've plucked out this feather here. Strip off the old soft stuff from the base. Now tie that in there. Make sure it's secure. A turn behind and a couple of more turns in front. And now it's a case of just winding the hackle on. I'm going to go in front first. It's working against me. There we are. I'm going to go between the wings, and between the wings again, sort of the figure of 8. Behind again. You don't necessarily have to do it in this order. It's just a case of getting a nice bit of grizzle hackle around those wings. There we are. Tie it off. I need to tighten this. What's something moving here? Anyway. A few nice turns just to hold it in place. One knot. And a second knot, and there you go, there's your Danica mayfly. That would catch trout anywhere that Danica mayflies hatch. I've proven it over the years, and again, I think the addition of the grizzle hackle and the grizzle hackle wings, I think, give an illusion of movement. That's, like I said earlier on, that's my guess. So you have that fly, and you kind of have two extremes. There we are. We have the mayfly and we have our little Griffith's gnat, our little midge. Whoop. Both tied with grizzle. So there you are, folks, the wonderful grizzle hackle. I would not be without it. It's my mainstay in a lot of respects. The other material I use a lot is deer hair, which I'll talk to you about on some other occasion. There are materials that I've used down through the years that have been proven to be effective at various times and more or less infrequently, but there are some things that I have found, and this is again my own experience, that will work all the time. Grizzle hackle is one of those. Grizzle hackle, just wrap it around a hook essentially and you have a killer fly. So I hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you're a fly tyer, I hope that you go out and get yourself some grizzle hackle and just see how effective it is. And obviously, if you're not a fly tyer or you're considering getting into fly tying, the first thing you should get is grizzle hackle, or at least one of the first things you should get. So, that's it for me again. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please click on the like button. It helps my channel, and if you really want to help my channel out, there's a link in the description to my Patreon page where you can support me as I go along, because there is a cost to doing these videos, and any bit of help would be appreciated. So